Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Heart Space Podcast. I am your host, Leela Dilla. This podcast was created from my personal desire to have meaningful conversations with humans that inspire my heart. On today's episode, I have the honor of talking with the gorgeous Kelsey Kazarian. Kelsey is a mentor, teacher, and facilitator of feminine arts. Her mission is to empower women to embody their sensuality as a tool to activate their inherent feminine magic. Kelsey believes in the revival of the ancient feminine mysticism through her study of temple arts, ritual magic, and goddess worship. She is passionate about helping women deprogram sex, relationships, and femininity in order to embody their unique expression of love, pleasure, and feminine grace. Kelsey and I met 2 years ago when I was in Costa Rica hosting a retreat called the Unleashed Retreat. This goddess was our chef, and she nourished us for the entire week while we were in paradise. I was truly mesmerized by the way she carried herself. And since then, I've invited her on to teach for some of the programs that I've offered, and I'm really happy to interview her today. During our chat, we talk about femininity. We talk about how we came into our paths of studying the sacred feminine arts. We talk about the temple priestess and explore the mother and father as archetypes in our lives. We talk about sexuality, sensuality, and how and why the feminine has been kept out of religion for thousands of years. Eventually, we find our way back to the beloved and chat about the spell of what many of us have been put under in regards to our lovers. I'm truly excited to share Kelsey with you. She is such a love, and I'm grateful to have her in my corner. Again, thank you for being here and being a crucial part of the Heart Space community. I love you. Enjoy. Kelsey Kazarian. She's here with me. The goddess. I met Kelsey in Costa Rica when she was our chef 2 years ago almost for our Unleashed retreat. And it was amazing. I was like mesmerized by you and your food and your energy and the way you carried yourself. And since then, you come and guest taught for some of my groups, and I've just loved following your journey. So it's a huge honor to have you on today.
Oh, thank you. I am so honored to be here. And yeah, you got to experience full spectrum, Kelsey.
Yeah, I did. I was like, this woman just made black beans sound sensual. So I need to figure out what she's doing. Yeah, that was incredible. Tell us what you do, what you have done, or what you currently do. How do you describe your work in the world?
Yeah, wow. So just a little background on me. I went to school to become a special education teacher. So I've always had a passion for educating and teaching. And then I kind of ejected from that way of life because it wasn't serving me, went on the Burning Man, traveling, this kind of seeking journey. And I found myself spending half my year for the last 5 years at a beautiful vortex called Danyasa in Dominical, Costa Rica, which is where you guys were for the Unleashed retreat.
Yeah.
And I was chefing there because food has always been a passion of mine. Now, more background info on me is I'm a very feminine woman, a very embodied woman, and I love to nurture and nourish. So to be able to infuse my sensual magic in a kitchen space was so much fun.
Remember they called you the kitchen witch.
Oh,
I was like, that's appropriate. Just back
there in booty shorts and a little.
How did that even happen? Just, not even 5 people, just being 35 people, effortlessly. It's wow, incredible. Yes, I can attest to that. That is the truest statement I've ever heard.
And so a huge part of my journey has been listening to invitations, right? I received the invitation to go to Danyasa. And if you're familiar with human design at all, I'm a projector. And so I am to wait for invitations. And I kept getting this invitation in my reality as being a sensual woman who was studying temple arts and studying the history of the goddess and the different feminine archetypes. I kept getting these invitations through conversations with sisters or various people that would come into Danyasa to share more about sensual embodiment, about sensual ritual and sex magic and embodying the goddess. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, spirit, I hear you. And I started opening myself up to mentor women on this. And almost immediately, my coaching practice filled up. I was able to launch my first online course, which is called Pussy Worship. It's a 28-day journey of erotic devotion with your pussy. So focusing on self-love and also self-pleasure techniques. Because what I found is that most women hadn't explored themselves to the capacity that they allowed a lover to explore themselves. And for me, what I've really been able to dial it down to now that my work has even evolved and transitioned more is sovereignty. It's about sovereignty. It's about like me knowing myself enough so that then I can share myself adequately. Right? It's like really owning my energy, owning my body, understanding myself deeply, because no matter what space we're in, if we don't know ourselves to the fullest capacity that at that moment we can, because it changes, right? How can we really offer our truth and our authenticity? And so now my work has transitioned even more from just focusing on sex, sensuality, sex magic, to more focusing on feminine embodiment, right? And this is like a really big blanket term that's like
popular now too.
Feminine, you know,
yeah.
that like we hear and see everywhere that can be a little bit cringe. And it's about how do I lead, guide, show up while remaining in my feminine pole. And in that, like the power that comes, because and I know I'm swoosh, swoosh all over the place, but feminine, our magic is that we are the oracle. We carry this divine connection to God that, yes, all beings have a connection to God, but because we actually are able to carry life, our psychic and intuitive powers are really, really profound and really special. And every single being has feminine and masculine within them. And every single being can channel their feminine essence and that magic and that mysticism. And every single being can also channel their structure and their fierceness and their like, whew, like that like masculine force where, you know, sometimes my feminine swirls so much that it's hard to get me to sit down at the computer and get done what I need to get done. You know, I also need my masculine and my sort of discernment. My masculine comes in when I'm setting boundaries and all of this. But how can I set boundaries in a way that's still incredibly feminine, rather than being like, let's look at an intimate situation, right? Where it's like, hey, so it's actually my boundary that I don't want my shirt to come off and I don't want to have sex. We can make out, but that's my boundary, compared to like, hey, so I want to let you know that my boundary is that I want to keep my clothes on and I just want to explore with our mouths. There's a frequency shift. And it's all about creating and cultivating polarity, not only in romantic encounters, but also in life. What's going to cultivate more polarity? Me like overly penetrating, this is my boundary, or me softening and sharing from a place of excitement, right? We see how one is almost a reaction to having our boundaries crossed in the past, whereas the other was an invitation. So really playing with this feminine polarity and how can I create more magic when I stay in that pole, which feels more comfortable for me. Right? Every person is their own person, but it's been really fun for me to work with this even deeper with my clients, right? Because I just watch the natural evolution of people think that they come to me for sex, but then we're like doing past life regressions and finding where it was actually unsafe to be a feminine and unsafe to be a woman, or there was major traumas that happened. And we go so deep to unveil, what does it feel like to be safe in my feminine form? You know, you talk so much about the nervous system, and it's really like in stepping into the safety in being a feminine being, how much my nervous system can settle. But I can't just be like, oh, it's safe. it's like, no, there's actually work and unraveling and coming home to myself. And that's where I get to pull in all my other tools and tricks, such as sex magic, right? Because sensuality, sex magic, self-pleasure, they're all super powerful for helping to regulate the nervous system and integrate into our being what it is that we're working to anchor.
Wow. So much. I was like, I don't know how many things I wanted to say, but I'm curious, like, because for me, I'm just curious your entry point to the feminine work, because for me, it wasn't super obvious. I think it's because the way that I was raised, I had a very like domineering feminine caretaker. So it wasn't super like an area I really wanted to be in. I was like, I don't really want to be like her. I don't really know how to do this. I don't really feel like I'm the goddess type. I also don't really feel that great in my masculine. So I kind of like hovered on the outside of diving into to studying the feminine or healing my feminine. So I'm curious, like, have you always been more inclined towards that essence or that more receptive, invitational, magnetizing, creative flow state? Or because I definitely wasn't. I feel like it was there, but I was so trained towards accomplishing, going, doing, that I had to like pull the emergency brake kind of and do this like, oh, I want to go this direction. And then I started my embodiment practices and actually prioritizing pleasure and allowing people to help me. And like, man, it was like a weird shift. It was like, I think it was my friend Traver that was like, when we go through that shift, it's like backing up a gigantic barge in like a small canal, trying to get the boat to turn. I was like, wow, that is what it felt like in the beginning. But some people are more inclined, like they just are, their feminine is still very illuminated. But so I'm curious what your entry point towards studying the feminine was. And then once you accepted that, and I know you said like people, you kind of kept getting these invitation, but you're probably already kind of in that world as the invitations came to you to start your like career path with it. So I'm wondering personally, just to start your practice with it, what did that feel like in you? Because for me, it was like this small whisper of just not really being satisfied in the way that I was doing things. And I was like, man, I just feel like something needs to shift. Like I didn't know what, but I just knew that felt like I was kind of jamming my circuits, which got me annoyed enough to try to shift. But it's always cool to hear how people go through their transition of like starting to honor that part of them and how healing it can be. So what was that like for you? And then what were those like first practices that you incorporated to like nourish that aspect?
Yeah, I wish I could offer like a hero's journey as to how I came.
But I love that not everyone does. Like mine was a hero's journey, but also like, damn, could I have just been like something that was there?
I grew up with my mom and my two sisters. I'm in the middle. And my dad was around and super active in our lives, but we were this household of women, really. And my dad, was like, there's always tampons everywhere. Everyone's always naked and blow drying their hair, and I'm just over it. So he really also supported us in thriving. And as interesting as this is, I grew up in a sex positive household in the 90s, which is kind of unheard of, right? Me and all my sisters were like, grinding ourselves all over all the furniture in the house all the time. And my parents were just like, cool, yeah, kids masturbate, like not a problem. So I got this, I was accepted at a young age for my sensuality, which got me into a little bit of trouble in the greater world because the greater world was not as open as my household was. And it wasn't as celebrated as it was in my house or like understood. And so I had always walked through life with this very feminine sparkle. Also, like my grandmother was this really strong, powerful feminist and was active in our lives as well. And then I went to school and I became a special ed teacher. And in that, you have to have, I really felt like within that I found my masculine, where it was almost like finding my like structure and my organization and like how to implement curriculum. And I worked with teens with emotional and behavioral disabilities. So within that, that was where I learned my masculine, and I learned my boundary setting and my discernment and my no, and my like having to hold that line in order to not be in a power struggle with a student, right? Because these are children who've come from really challenging lives. So it was almost like I found my masculine there. Now, within this, I also was raised in a household without a predominant religious background. We were, culturally Jewish, but as far as I was concerned, God could be whatever I wanted it to be. And so I was like agnostic when I was younger, because I was like, I want to study every religion and every God before I make a decision. And there was a point where I started getting exposed. Maybe the opening book was, maybe it was like Awakening Shakti, where I started to get exposed to, maybe in my yoga teacher training, that's what it was. I got exposed to the Hindu pantheon, and I was like, oh, cool. And I had always loved mythology and, like kind of that realm of it. And so I started then studying goddesses. And in that, I was like, oh, but this goes deeper. There were women who worshiped the goddess for the, like, as their offering in life, the priestesses. And so then I started to dig and go super deep. I remember like spending time in libraries trying to find everything that I could about this concept of the temple priestess, to really understand her and read different like mythology around her, and different like, there's the history of the temple priestess has really been like burned, lost, and forgotten. And to try to find stuff about her was really hard. But in that, I was like, it's actually really safe to be fully in this in the world. There was a time, before Abrahamic religions, which you've heard me talk about on various things that I've spoken for you on before, but before Abrahamic religions, where the goddess was revered and it was safe to be feminine, because that's what I kept coming up against in my reality, right? It was like, harden, get harder, like you need to be tougher. All the other teachers when I was teaching who were older than me, because I was like the young, bubbly, super feminine teacher, like you need to grow a thicker skin. Kind of
not powerful without that.
Right. Like I felt like I was really balanced, pardon me. I felt like I was really balanced in my masculine and feminine, but from the outside, I was being viewed still as too feminine. And so then in my own late night research, I'm like, yeah, but there's a way. This is safe. It's okay to be like this. This is actually a place of power. And I shouldn't need to try to conform to society and be in this very particular way of behavior. Like, that's what we saw happen with third wave feminism, right? It was like, I need to like do everything that the men are doing in order to assert my equality. And we lost some of the magic of what it is to really honor and be in power from our feminine. So I started studying archetypes and started reading about all these different goddesses from all over the world and learning different rituals and bringing them into my practices, and which was so incredibly powerful. If you have any interest and you haven't studied different goddesses, we can link a couple of resources in with this. I think that actually you have this same deck, the deck by Megan Watterson.
Love her work.
Where it's not only goddesses, it's also women who stood for femininity throughout history, like Joan of Arc. Right? These like powerhouse women that at times even had to assimilate into more masculine archetypes in order to fit in. And so there's, and then there's also Awakening Shakti. There's, my favorite book of all times, Lineage of the Codes of Light. There's so many books that dive into goddess, priestess, feminine history, mythology, discovery, and to really explore those and see the aspects of yourself within it. I feel like that study really helped to pave a way for safety in my feminine in the real world.
Yeah, because that history has been lost. Like, explain to me or to everyone what a temple priestess even is. Like that, like the fact that it literally isn't these Abrahamic religions. There, where is the feminine in the divine, or like where is the feminine in power, unless the feminine moves towards being like a man or being like the masculine, then all of a sudden there's power there. So there, the swing from, I work specifically with women, and that convincing or deprogramming, but and then relearning that our feminine essenced nature is powerful in itself. Like there is a lie we've been given that like the only way to be powerful is to be masculine, and we don't have like a construct for feminine power. We think the feminine is soft, weak, tender, fragile, like a pushover. Like so wrong. So I want to know what the temple priestess from your description would be, and it's just so fascinating that like all of those powerhouses that you just spoke of have just been pretty much forgotten, and now they're waking back up again, which is
fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah.
But just one piece before I hop into the temple priestess is that the feminine is so powerful. So powerful and mysterious, right? Think about times before they understood how pregnancy worked, that it was related to seed. Women just brought children from God in the eyes of men. That is, if in those times, and we're talking like ancient, like BC times. Wow. In those times, like what we didn't understand, we feared. Mm-hmm. And it's, in my eyes, it's like actually like a war or a psyop on the power of the feminine, because we have all shrunk down so much, and thus we must rely on the masculine, the systems in place, rather than our intuitive power, because we have been taught that we are not powerful and that men are the almighty powerful. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm also very deep in the masculine revival and it being safe for men to be men. I think about like Trevor's work and, like really like holding that pole. And if there's a reason why we were led astray from our power, right? Mm-hmm. And so let me paint this vision for you. Mm-hmm. Let's go to Mesopotamia, the first known civilization, right? Mm-hmm. And so we are looking at like 2000, 2500 BCE, right? So, long before Christ, early times, where Mesopotamia is the first civilization. They worship the goddess Inanna. Inanna was one of the first that was worshipped.
I love her card in that deck. The Inanna one is like, oh, the art on that deck is incredible. And yeah, I pulled in Hedawala today. And I was like,
oh, right.
It was beautiful too.
Where she's the high priestess of Inanna, and the first recorded author in history.
Actually, the first time I pulled her card from that deck, and I've had it for a long time. I was like, ooh, and I thought of you because I remember you speaking of Inanna. Yeah.
She wrote the hymns of Inanna. And so again, like the first author, like the first published author in all of history was a woman and the high priestess of the Inanna temple. Mm-hmm. So we know what priests are, right? Priests serve God. And we see this like in modern Christianity with nuns. But the priestesses who were serving Inanna, who later evolved into Astarte, Ishtar, Isis in Egypt, right? So, the goddess has many forms and takes many names throughout time and history, translates to Athena, and, it like keeps going. But they knew the power that their prayer held when they infused their prayer with their feminine essence. That is their sensuality. That is their softness. That is their receptivity, right? They could receive divine currents, divine messages, channeled messages. They were oracles. They were channels. And they knew that their prayer, the way that they held prayer, the way that they held ceremony, the way that they held sisterhood was necessary for the community to thrive, not only just in the aspect of, there's a prayer, there's a place to go pray and honor the feminine, but also so that there wasn't famine, so that there was feast, so that there wasn't flooding, so that everything was fertile and juicy and healthy. And it's actually when we see the temples starting to get burned that there's a correlation to when there was more famine, more drought, more, that was when war started happening between men. But within these temples, like really women living together in devotional sisterhood, and not in this celibate, we are pure, and that means that nothing can get in way.
Yeah.
Right. In this way of like, like feeling their eroticism, feeling the natural urge. I mean, we are all women and we know what it's like to ovulate. Imagine being in a house of women and recognizing that that life force is a direct line to God. And that when we blast off into orgasm, we can connect in with higher powers. So they were utilizing that. And when we look at it from like the science perspective, the brainwave perspective, one of my dear sisters, Annette, teaches about this a lot. We're actually changing our brain waves in orgasm. So we get to a space where our subconscious can be programmed in a malleable way. So they knew that they were releasing and opening in a way that they could program reality to function in a way that best served the highest good.
Wow.
Now,
isn't that a change up from how we have been to what we've been taught about sex or orgasm or even just our sexual organs or even just our body? Oh my God. And that experience can only happen through our body.
Well, and we look at, okay, so where did shame around sex come in? Right? You should be feeling like, oh, it's bad. Da, da, da. Why? Again, it's a control mechanism. They don't want us to have our own access to God, because if we have our own access to God, we are sovereign. And if we are sovereign, then we do not need the systems, right? We look at like the church, and when that came in, I mean, literally like the wars between like Protestant and like Catholicism, like two groups of people who believed firmly in Jesus Christ, but were fighting each other over what your relationship to worship could be. If you're not familiar, Catholicism said that you needed to worship in a church and confess your sins, whereas Protestantism said it doesn't matter as long as you have faith and you are with Jesus. So there's like, and ultimately Catholicism won. Like Catholicism won those great religious wars in Europe, and that you need something else to access God. You can't have God yourself.
Yeah.
And so then disconnecting us from our sexuality, because if you had zero shame around your sexuality, you would be able to go to ecstatic states of bliss. It's our shame and our guilt and our programming and our uncomfortability with our own vulnerability that keeps us from accessing those points, which is powerful because we can deprogram those and get more comfortable in our embodiment. And then from there, blast off. But it keeps us from blasting off. And thus, back to the temple times, at a certain point, man systems caught on. All the women have the power. It was scary for them, even though there were also priest temples doing the worship. But they started to get confused, and they started to feel like maybe, the women are witches, right? They're doing something against us, or, something happened to my dick. It must be because I something at the priestess, I went to worship there. Like it's literally like way before the witch trials, but it was a modern aspect. And what happened to the temples? They were burned. In I think 1100 BCE, Abraham left the city of Ur, which was in Mesopotamia and Samaria. He left and he went to Canaan, where he would then basically found what was Judaism and what is the text in the Old Testament. And shortly thereafter, almost every temple was eradicated. Now, in all fairness, the temple started to be eradicated in about, like there were a few that had gotten burned before then because men were starting to get, and then, Abraham leaves and Abraham's like, oh, I'm channeling God, who's actually God, and only men in my bloodline can hear the word of God. And God only favors men and is a man and only speaks to men. And in fact, in order to prove my loyalty to him, I have to sacrifice my firstborn on top of a mountain. So he literally brings his son onto a top of a mountain to do a blood sacrifice. And at the last second, God's like, oh, just kidding, just kidding. That's just so you proved your loyalty to me. I'm sorry. What?
Yeah.
A woman would never do that, ever. And B, what kind of deity are you channeling? Like those of us in the like woo-woo world know that you have to be careful what you're pulling through. You might think it's this divine being, but it could be dark. And if they're inviting you into blood sacrifice, like, come on.
So discernment here.
But they were then so hungry for the power of God again, because there was like this jealousy and this confusion as to how women were able to bring so much. Whereas like, could you imagine like feeling like kind of useless to humanity other than like taking care of the farms as a man, because they didn't know what their seed did. And ultimately, it's not about the feminine. And I could go off on the theology tangents forever, so we'll bring it back.
It is interesting that people don't, even how many people wouldn't know any of that history around what we commonly understand God to be, this off-planet whitish man with a beard and a white robe. It's like, where did that actually originate? Like, what are what is actually happening? I have just a devout love for Mary Magdalene and her gospel. And I am very close with a few Catholic people, and they have a resistance towards reading the gospels that have been recovered. And a part of me is like, how could that be possible when what is now known, like in, I think it was 1964, they uncovered those scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. And, Mary Magdalene's gospel of Thomas, gospel of Philip, under perfect mind, like these beautiful scriptures that are like, that's part of it. Like, let's just read the whole story where the feminine does belong, at least some, and the story of Jesus Christ. Like, let's bring this together where there's a feminine piece. And so it's interesting to me when there's a resistance towards new knowledge or discovery, or actually seeing the whole picture of why we believe what we believe. Because we could say like that tangent on history was like woo-woo, but it's not actually. Like, that's like, are we just going to take what we have been told by our parents or our grandparents or whoever and just take it as face value? Like, that must be truth. It's like,
right. And in my mind, we like really like, I like blessed, but I really feel like we dropped the ball on like what Jesus was trying to come and say. Like the Abrahamic, and I come from Jewish lineage, but like the Abrahamic, like Old Testament, like Judaism was actually like pretty archaic and patriarchal. And that's where we like see the advent of patriarchy. And then Jesus was like, hey guys, it's just about love. No one's more powerful than one another. It's about love. And then everyone's like,
compassion and walking with everyone.
Right. Let's hide all the books that talk about that, and let's make it about how he died for our sins and sin, which brings in shame and gives thus control. It's like,
I say it often. I would absolutely be walking with Jesus and listening to him and being his student, and like, absolutely. And I don't identify as a Christian at all. And I absolutely would have been, because I don't believe that Christianity is actually following Jesus's specific teachings and the way that he lived. I mean, think about now the way that we treat, or would our society would treat, men that identified and lived in alignment with compassion, forgiveness, empathy, eating with everyone. He was a healer, like
hands-on healing arts.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like the way that
satanic.
Yeah, exactly. And he revered his mother and Mary Magdalene, who I believe was his partner, and like there was such a beautiful blend. So to me, I'm like, ultimate teacher. Do not identify as Christianity specifically unless we're going to blend everything together. And then I do definitely pull inspiration from that. It's so interesting though, how we're willing as a humanity to take what we've been told as truth instead of doing our own exploration around it, and really trusting like our inclination towards knowing more from a deeper depth, and like really deprogramming the things that, because I've just been handed so much shit in my life. I know we all have been handed shit that eventually we're like, that wasn't true.
Right.
Why was I living my life based off that, with so many different elements? And religion is one of them. Femininity is another one. And masculine, feminine, like aside from gender too. Like you said in the beginning that we all have a blend of those two energy dynamics inside of us, regardless of the gender identity we have those two poles and energies, and being able to be in one and then the other creates such a polarity and empowerment inside of ourselves, and then it enhances relationships, and it really brings such a beautiful dynamic to life. And it can be associated with gender, but it doesn't have anything to do with that. We can watch it in the natural world. It's everywhere. So it's such a beautiful point of exploration. If anyone listening is interested in it, just like, what the hell is masculine, feminine? Like, let's start learning about it. It has opened up so much, and it really creates such a beautiful dynamic. And I feel like Jesus, wrapping it back around to Jesus, he was like doing this, because I'm thinking of like the Vesica Pisces. Like, he was living it. He was like he was teaching us how to be a fully awakened human, fully human, fully divine, and how to engage with the world in an empowered way, honoring all of the humanness, and then honoring our ability to channel the divine through us, regardless of which kind of body we stand in, because there's definitely such a has been for a long time that's been lost, that there's only certain types of people. We have to go to a building and someone else hands us our divine power, or like gives us an opportunity to connect with God. What a relief it was to my nervous system and my mind and my heart to recognize that I can experience the divine inside of me every moment of my life. Wow. Talk about empowerment. It is here, like the breath of God. I breathe it in every moment. Can you imagine like how much happier our whole world would be to remember that just simple sacred truth, that we have access to it.
And in my mind, like, the point of life, I know this is a broad statement.
I'm probably gonna say yes.
Inner union and union with Creator. Mm-hmm. And in that, we get to have so many other unions that help to magnify that. But I know that you're on the same train as me, so I'll say it as a blanket statement. But as always, everyone listening, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. This is my truth based on my studies and my heart's truth, and it might not be yours, and that's fine. But Jesus was only able to offer the high caliber transmissions that he was because of his union with Mary Magdalene, who was a priestess in a temple of Isis. So it was his.
Some of that, if you want to. Megan Watterson's Mary Magdalene Revealed is awesome. Read that book.
Incredible.
Yes, I totally agree.
And that was union. That was the point. And so it's really, and that's like, again, what the systems, the powers that be have been trying to keep us from, was our own union with God. They made it like, no, you can't even access God. You need Jesus. The whole time he's like, guys, don't worship me. It's not about me. Yeah, and they're like,
the heaven lies within you.
Right. Exactly. You have it all. And there's so many sacred technologies that we have within our own bodies, beings, tools that we can access to come into greater union. And, this goes back to my story, is that I went so deep into the goddess, so deep into, and I was crying in the car coming home from the hot springs, sitting in the car with a bunch of my friends who are also coaches, 2 men's sexuality coaches, 1 EFT practitioner, right? And so powerhouse car, and I'm crying about yearning for a partner, for a lover. And my one friend, Ori Devan, he's incredible. He turns to me and he says, Kelsey, tell me about your self-pleasure practice. I'm like, well, I call in, I usually work with Isis or Mary Magdalene, and I call them into the field and da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, when was the last time that you made love with a masculine archetype in your own pleasure practice? And I'm like, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, so then that's somewhere I need to lean into, right? The tapping, Jeff, the tapping coach was like, you feel fear there. What's behind that? And I'm like, if I worship the masculine, then I'm dishonoring the feminine. And I'm like, oh, that's a belief system I don't want to stand behind. That's a program that I don't want to have, because I do ultimately know it's about union of masculine and feminine, that I'm stronger when I'm in union, not just when I'm like lost in erratic, chaotic feminine or overly structured masculine. I was like, oh, there's juice for me there. Okay. So I went home and I made love to the version that us new agey humans, Yeshua, right? The like sacred name of Jesus. And I went home and I made love to Yeshua using my rose quartz wand and in a full ritual ceremony. And I started integrating, what would it look like if I just played with for a little while God the Father? Because I had been associating the archetype of God the Father with that Abrahamic deity that I didn't agree with, that entity that he was channeling, when actually there is a masculine principle of God in this universe, just like there's a feminine principle of goddess. And then I started realizing that all of my issues with the masculine, distrust, fear of abandonment, were directly correlated to my issues with God the Father. Then I was talking to and communicating with some of my male friends and seeing how they're discussing how their distrust in the feminine, fear that she's going to consume them, take from them, they don't understand her, was their issues with the goddess. So that we have these it's so meta, right? It's not even like with my partner now, if I'm like, he's not supporting me. It's like, is it actually about him not supporting me, or is it about me not feeling supported by God?
Right.
And where he's like, oh, you're like, whatever his issue could be with me, it's more a reflection on his internalized distrust of the feminine than really about me. And all of my relationship issues can be fixed at the meta level, because if I'm sitting there being like, oh, he's not supporting me, he forgets to make me a beverage, he doesn't invite me to this thing with all of our friends, like he shows up in suit. Whereas if I'm like, my partner supports me more than anything, and I'm so supported by God and goddess, and I'm like anchoring that I'm supported, he's pulling out the chair for me, he's opening the car door, he's giving me gifts, and it's like, oh, what is even real besides my own perception of reality based on my relationship with the Godhead, right? So there's like divine mother, divine father, but there's the Godhead, like the universal consciousness that is, androgynous and cannot be given anything. And it's like from that point where I'm like, oh, okay, but I project God the Father stuff onto all of the men in my life, and they project the Holy Mother onto all of us. So it's like, if we really want to do the work, we got to go meta and then watch everything trickle down.
Wow.
So,
yes. I'm like, we probably dropped some people off, but those that are on, I fucking love what you just said, because that's such my jam right now. I feel like I went to Peru, which I keep talking about because it was so fucking powerful for me. I went there in July. and sat in a bunch of sacred ceremonies. And prior to that, I was really doing a lot of healing around Father God and just the masculine, and really healing my relationship with that, and recognizing like, how do I feel protected and safe in my life? Do I feel recognized and celebrated by life itself? Like, do I feel like life is on my side? Do I feel protected and held? Like, that is my relationship to the Father God. And that is such an important piece to feeling safe as we move through the world. Like, we have to believe that life itself, this massive consciousness that's holding all things, is here for us. That is like the Father God presence, and really contemplating that. If the word God doesn't work for you, although I love that word because I also wasn't raised with any religion being pushed at me, so it feels nice and lovely. But insert whatever word, right? That energy or that force or that power that is like the container for all things happening here is in service to me. That like just orienting, like healing that aspect so we can get to that place is such a big piece of healing. And then when I went to Peru, it was a lot of healing with the Mother God of like, oh my fucking God, I'm actually cared for too. Not only protected, but I'm nurtured and cared for by life itself. And really did a lot of like healing of like being back in the womb and really feeling like I was connected to like almost like an umbilical cord, like my roots into Mother Earth, and being like, oh, we're all so cared for. Like almost like the simplest, dumbest teaching of like, I'm cared for, but actually believing that in my whole being.
That into your nervous system, right?
It was like, ooh, all right, you don't need to be in anxiety anymore, girl. Good, I got you. Father God's like, I got you. And she's like, I really got you. Guys, not here, guys, come in here. Mother and Father God, both those elements, recognizing that the way that we are supported and nurtured and protected by life changes everything in our personal experience. Just like you said, like understanding that there's always those two simultaneous realities happening at one time too, of like, there's the cosmic perspective of those archetypes, and then there's how is that showing up in my day-to-day reality with this person I'm having a conversation with my partner, with my business, with my sisters. Like, how am I feeling supported or celebrated? Or it's the same. The way I relate to those God archetypes is going to be the way that I relate to the people. And the way that I relate to people is going to be the way I relate to the God archetype. So really, like the entry point, we're going to the same place. We're going to do the work on both levels, the penthouse and level 1, to really be able to find deep, deep healing. It's incredible. Oh my God.
Everyone listening, like really like integrating, these are archetypes. Mm-hmm. And I think that you and I were able to go deep with them because we had delved in and found the power in other archetypes, such as Kali Ma, or, you know, like embracing these and feeling the power. Mm-hmm. Even if you wanted something I do with my personal expression is I'm like, okay, what archetypes do I want to be showing? Okay, I want to like feel the priestess. I want to feel the witchy medicine mama. I want to feel the professional babe. You know, like those are archetypes. And whenever you call in an archetype, you can show up in suit. And so these, the Holy Mother, Holy Father, these are archetypes that are so inundated in our reality that just looking at them and working with them just culturally, right? So much for, thousands of years can be really powerful, because as always, we are carrying programming within us that's not just from our life. That's, you see the picture of like us in our grandmother's wombs, basically. And like, we're like going generations and generations back, and we're carrying so much. And so by clearing the distortions around both the goddess and God the Father, you are doing serious, deep, powerful work to come back to your true beingness.
Yeah, man. And then also noting, like, something for me with both of those archetypes was recognizing how I was taking my experience with my actual father and my actual mother, and how those, like the way that I was trauma responding to those personal relationships was actually skewing the way that I was allowing life to either nurture or support me. So healing the mother and father wounds personally in our life is huge, so that we can actually start to even conceptualize what does it look like when I have a holy mother and father holding space for me. Like, holy fuck. Yeah, that can be an entry point if the concept of the bigger aspect is too much at first, like let's just heal the mother-father wound so that we can.
And everyone has mother-father wounds.
Yeah.
Everyone, even if your parents were the most amazing in the world.
Hugely. I want to give you time to talk about your beloved thing because we haven't talked about that yet, and it's such a big piece. So however you want to segue into that, because I think it's so important. And even just like that God-shaped hole in our heart. We talked about that before we started recording. So take it away. I want to hear that piece.
So I am about to launch a course that I feel like is the most powerful thing that I have created.
I love it.
Or that has come through me, really. And it is around, I spoke a little bit of like how the journey was starting to unfold, right? Where I'm like crying and yearning for where is my partner? And I see this so often, especially with women who are conscious and evolved. And also it's super prevalent in the masculine community of like conscious, spiritual, new age, whatever you want to call it. And this yearning for like, my beloved, where is he? Like, I'm not kidding. I used to like walk around, go to ecstatic dance and be like, are you my king? Are you my king? Like looking at everyone like that little duck in that book. Are you my mom? You know, like, is it you? Is it you? Could it be you? Can I project all sorts of stuff onto you so that I can make you into them? And it was actually making me anti-magnetic to love. And I saw after like, I had a lover that I was seeing who just kind of, I say like, dropped me like a hot potato, rejected me. And then my best friend broke up with me. We're now back together, but my best friend had broken up with me. And I was just like watching things just kind of fall apart in my life. And I was just like, what is happening? And I went deep into ceremony, which is like where I cancel everything for 3 days and lay at my altar and like go as deep into it as I can. Again, this is that deep nervous system work of when I feel dysregulation, I lean into it so that I can clear it from my system and see what the cause is and work with it. And in this like dark moment, I'm journaling and I'm like, oh, I have not been coming from any of these relationships with wholeness. I am searching so hard for something outside of me, like you said, to fill that God-shaped hole inside me. And ultimately, okay, so let's say that I never met him. My soul contracted human who we would align and, you know, wear all white on the playa and, you know, like this like whole like spiritual like woo version of Prince Charming that I felt like he was going to somehow save me. We were going to align our missions and everything that I did would be more powerful because of my like this whole storyline. And I realized, wow, I'm seeking that so hard that I am not coming from anything from wholeness. And ultimately, if that were to never happen, would I see myself as a failure? Would none of my life be worth it? And when I really leaned into that reality of like, okay, he's not coming. What if that doesn't exist? Would I still love myself and be okay? Of course.
But that's a big fucking question, Kelsey. Holy shit. It is such an important question to ask, whatever gender you are. Holy shit, because we romanticize or like we put our partners through a divination process or something that like this one human being will fill this cosmic void inside of us. And man, that just comes from like every Disney movie, especially as women.
Yeah.
Will come and happily ever after. It's like, what is that? It's so easy actually to even pretend like we're not doing that when we are. I was like, I'm good, but I'm not good. But I'm good. But it's like I do. Like, no, wow, holy shit. Where am I sourcing my power from? Where is that actual ultimate connection coming from? How do I show up whole to begin with so that I don't project or cling to or suck from anyone around me, partner or otherwise, friend, business, anybody?
Well, and what I decided was like, I'm going to eliminate that programming from my reality. And I'm just going to lean into there is no one. Because when I really stepped into that reality of what would it be like if that never happened, would I be okay? What did I see? I saw the myriad of incredible soul connections that I have with my sisters, my friends, my God, all of my humans in my life that fill me so much, fill me with purpose, fill me with joy, fill me with love, fill me with inspiration. So why am I waiting for this one thing when it's all around me? And what makes, like, to me, the soulmate is really a poignant soul contract. And it's less about finding your soulmate and about finding soul aligned love. Someone who you are going to learn from, grow from in a profound way that can happen in a way that's harmonious, right? Not that like, oh, we're learning because we're in trauma drama together all the time, even though that does happen. Yeah. But this like, oh, like what makes my partner now any more poignant than my best friends? I'm in deep relationship with all of them. And I learned so much from all of them. So to put one on a pedestal and define my worth based on whether or not I have that, it made me blind to all of the magic in my life. And like I said, it was anti-magnetism. All of a sudden, I was the least magnetic to anything that I had ever experienced in my entire life, because the universe was like, you can't keep going on the path that you're on, right? The ascension journey, the soul's ascension. You can't keep going on that path with this belief system. You got to drop it.
Incredible.
And so, but I was the girl who had like laundry lists of like letters to my beloved that I'd share with him later, reading the book, How to Find Your One. Like I was like talking about my king and what he's like and what he'd feel like, this whole projection, even to what he'd look like. At festivals, I'd be like searching for him, totally dropped out of the present moment magic, searching for something else that would fix me, make me worthy, make me happy, disregarding all of the magic in my life. So I started deprogramming and coming back to wholeness, because ultimately it's about my relationship with the creation that is life, creator, God. I too really like the word God because it feels like a reclamation for me. But again, source, spirit, I empower you actually, if you're triggered by that word, to go to bed and ask universal consciousness what you can call it, to refer to it, and see what comes through in your dream space. I did that when I used to be really uncomfortable with the word God. And I had a crazy dream where I was on my hands and knees praying, which was something I would never do, to source. And so I was like, oh, that's the word. And I had never heard anyone use that before. So there's a word that's unique for you, that is accessible for you if that doesn't work. But for me, that God-shaped hole in my heart, we are fragments of consciousness, and we are looking to come into union with consciousness again. So if I focus on my relationship with Creator and clearing anything that's in the way of my relation, and in that, it's earth magic, right? It's worshiping this beautiful earth that we incarnate on. It's body magic. It's accepting and loving my body and all of its juiciness and all of her, societally perceived imperfections. It's the journey of loving myself in my full humanness, because all of that is also a gift from consciousness. And so I like fully ejected from it, right? And for my birthday, my 30th birthday, I had my sisters come over and pray with me. And they did have you ever heard of a blessing way? Like, for those of you that aren't aware, this is what New Age women do for each other when they're pregnant instead of a baby shower. And it's kind of like we're going to honor you and worship you and like make you feel like a queen and, like sing over you and make flower mandalas around you. So my friends offered me a blessing way. and I had them witness my prayers. And then we like did a procession down to the creek at my house and offered roses along the way, and then offered roses to the creek in honor of holding these prayers. Wow. And I spoke all my prayers that I'd pre-written. And at this point I was ejected for like 5 months. So I was not even talking about partnership. And you can time check me at any moment, but I was not even talking about partnership. And my girlfriends were like, there's something else. You have one more prayer. And I'm like, okay. And like, if it is aligned and ordained by God, I would love to experience this love that I feel for all of you and for myself with a male counterpart. And they're like, tell us about him. And I'm like, I don't want to. And they're like, it's not a manifestation list, Kelsey. Like, feel safety in accepting a man in. And they're like, on the spot kind of coaching me on my birth. Like, okay. And so I just went into like the feeling tones of how I would feel in a lovership that was aligned and healthy and safe. And so, we do the procession, all the things. I have all these women holding this prayer. And I then a couple of days later have a big, wild birthday party at my house. And I'm the vision. I'm wearing a floor-length sheer Free People lace dress. And I'm holding a bouquet of roses. And I'm coming down the stairs at my house. And I see this guy on my doorstep at my birthday party. And I'm just like, like, do not project all over, stranger. Because I had a shared birthday party with a couple friends. And so I was like, do not project all over this stranger. And, he like talks to me and gave me a crystal because it was my birthday party. And then like, so I could feel the nervousness. I could feel everything like in my being, in my body. And the whole time I'm like, do not project onto this incredibly handsome, amazing man who just walked into your house.
I just showed you up for your birthday.
Birthday present. On my doorstep, which later a girlfriend of mine reminded me when I was deep in the beloved programming, was one of my prayers, that he would just show up on my doorstep. Yeah. So anyways, he and I end up dancing and having this deep connection over the rose, actually. And I like bring him up to my room to have some rose medicine. I was working with this rose trio at the time, white rose, and we end up connecting. We kissed, and I was like, oh. And so I then, because I had fully released it, came into this incredibly powerful, magical union where he's like, I have never loved anyone this quickly or in the way that I love you. And I'm like, I have never loved anyone in the way that I love you. Like there's nothing that I've experienced in my life that is like this. And I have loved and loved powerfully.
Wow.
But it was because I was able to really detach from all of these projections. And even now, like he and I have a joke that's like, love of my life for now, because now is all that there is. And it's like, whether it lasts 4 more days, 40 years, or 400 lifetimes, it's perfect because I'm trusting God, I'm trusting the universe. And he and I are exchanging codes. For as long as that happens, it's perfect and it's all that we need. And now
so
to not project all of the things that I thought my beloved would have onto him, and not like, I saw the parts of me that wanted to be like, you're not doing this, or you're not this, or you're not this. So I should wash, rinse, and repeat and find someone who can do that. And it's, also knowing myself deeply and knowing what's important and how he hits those really important things, but he's also imperfect, just like I am. He's also a human. And I saw the version of myself that would have been attached to that programming, that would have been like, you're not it. He's still coming for me. Now get this. I have been working with a channel who's incredibly powerful, Victoria Jane, for like 6 years. And she was the first person I asked her 6 years ago, like, do I have a soul contracted partner, like a soulmate?
Mm-hmm.
She said, yes. There's someone who you have a contract with, who you could weave in and out of each other's lives, or you could choose you could choose the path of like marriage, baby, like to stay together.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, that does exist. It doesn't matter what form it'll take, but that does exist. And I'm like, okay, so that's what kind of put me on my seeking journey to begin with.
Yeah, right.
I have a call with her about 3 months into the relationship. And at the end of the call, we talk about my business. We talk about all the things. And at the end of the call, I'm like, should I ask? Should I not ask? Because I had been in this thing where I'm like, wow, I don't want to project that this person is my person, but he feels like my person. So I was like, is a name of my partner for confidentiality, I won't say it, but I was like, is my partner that soul contract that you told me about? She says, yes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, way to challenge the programming within me, right? Yeah. To not project all that madness onto him. And I saw how I could only receive it now because I'm actually so grounded and solid within myself and my relationship with Creator that, like, great, I met him. This soul contract, that's all it is. Again, what makes that any different than my best friends?
Right, because we're all soul contracts.
For as long as that lasts, that's fine.
It's okay. Speaking of him. He's like, I'm trying to contact you. We have a contract.
But, if that doesn't work out with him, am I a failure? Mm-hmm. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm just here to learn. We're all just here to learn. But the process of this deprogramming was really allowing myself to, like, go into the death and come back to wholeness. And that's what I'm guiding women through, is this really taking them into the journey of Inanna, the underworld journey. You have to shed the layers, the 7 layers, in order to die and be reborn as your exalted self. Because we can't get it until we shed. And again, however long this relationship that I'm in now will last, doesn't matter. I'm here to learn and grow with this soul. And it's like, when I stop projecting family and and it needs to be this and this and this, and just trust what's happening, that's where magic happens.
So freaking powerful. What's that course called that you're launching? Is it called The Beloved?
It is called The Beloved Reset, because it's about resetting our programming around what the beloved is and how we relate to it.
Yeah,
so that we can magnetize soul-aligned relationships and opportunities.
Yeah, man, I love that so much. I'm one of the women's groups that I'm leading right now. We move a different archetype every month, and we moved the lover maybe last month or the month before. But there was a lot of, like, it was the lover first with being the lover of God. Like, can we align with being God's beloved and vice versa? And what does that look like? And how much does that fill us from within? And then how much does that change our relationships in our life? How much does that change the way that I engage with the world? Yeah, incredible. Wow. So cool. I love it. Is there anything, like any way that people can contact you, or, oh, hang on, my speaker shifted. There we go. Can you say something?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Is there any, just how people can contact you or find out what you're doing, or aside from that?
Thank you so much for bringing me on. And thank you, all of you, for staying with this winding road.
It's a bunch of feminine beings listening, so they're like,
exactly. So there's a myriad of ways that you can contact me, work with me. I definitely recommend checking out my Instagram, where I oftentimes share on my story inspirations and things that I'm moving through and how that's inspiring my journey. So that is kels.kazarian, and I think we'll put it in the text of this.
Totally.
In that, I have 2 self-paced courses available. One is pussy worship, which I spoke about earlier. So to come into a harmonious and erotically devotional relationship with your pussy. And then the other is temple priestess activation. So if you got turned on, excited by the history of the temple priestess, and you want to know more about her practices, her rituals, and how to embody her modernly, that is a self-paced course that is available either via my website or my Instagram in the link tree that you can take at any moment. I also, at the mid of this month, around the 15th, we'll have 2 openings for my one-on-ones. So if you are interested in mentoring with me along the lines of embodying your feminine essence and how that can activate and alchemize all areas of your life, reach out. You can go on my link tree and fill out an application for that.
Man, I love it. I love being in your orbit. Thank you for always coming on and dousing us with your magic.
I just want to say that, of course, this week we'll launch the Beloved Reset.
Oh, yeah.
A journey that starts November 8th.
Okay, perfect. Yay. I love it. So intriguing. Keep up what you're doing. I love it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and wishing all of you here that are listening a beautiful day. Stay in your heart, stay in your body, take deep breaths.
Yeah, always. So happy to be doing this with you. Thanks for being here. Okay. Bye. This is Leela Dilla, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Heart Space podcast. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Please visit leeladilla.com to check out the courses, retreats, or other deep dives that I have coming up. And remember, if you are a woman looking for a place to learn, expand, and awaken to your highest potential, I'd absolutely love to have you as a part of my women's community, the Heart Space. Offering yoga classes every month, meditations, breathwork, wisdom workshops, sacred ritual, and all things feminine healing. I would love to have you as a part of our tribe. If you're interested in this, please visit leeladilla.com/the-heart-space. Sending you massive love and gratitude. Catch you on the flip side. Namaste.